Good evening and welcome everybody to our special Talking Points presentation for this month. My name is John Harry. I'm the Executive Director of the Portage County Historical Society, and I'm so happy that you are with us for this awesome presentation with two of our board members, Brad and Diane, about the history of Plover, Wisconsin. We're going to get to that in just a second. While you get settled in, maybe just get comfortable for a nice evening of history. I'm just going to update you on some of the things that's going on with the Historical Society, and I'll hit you with some links in the comments. This is a good opportunity to also let you know if you have a question for Brad or Diane or myself, you can put those in the comments if you're watching on Facebook or YouTube. There'll be a Q&A portion at the end. So that's when we'll handle those. This month is May. It's Membership May. We're trying to get 200 new members by the end of the month, and we're making great progress, but we really could use you. So if you go to our website and hit that Get Involved tab, and I'll put the link in the comments after I'm done talking here, you can get set up with a membership to the Portage County Historical Society. It's what helps us do programming like this. It helps us maintain our sites and all of our archives and the artifacts that we care for. Basically, our members are our lifeblood. So please support us through your membership if you're enjoying what you see tonight. Some events on the horizon, some big things. On the weekend of Memorial Day, the Saturday and Sunday, so May 28th and 29th, the Rising Star Mill in Nelsonville, which is one of our historic sites that we own, has their annual art show and sale. It's going to be a great one after 2 years of a hiatus to come back and do that. And then also off of a hiatus, coming up on June 18th and 19th is Heritage Days at Heritage Park in Plover. And this year we've got music from the Grey Cats, bluegrass from Sloppy Joe. On the Saturday, we'll be doing a barn dedication to Anton Ande, who sadly passed away last year. And then the Sunday we'll have a pig roast catered by Rockman's Catering. So we've got fun things going on there. And of course, Memorial Day weekend, we reopen everything, not just the Rising Star Mill, but Firehouse number 2 on Strongs Avenue, and of course, Heritage Park, which will have regular hours this summer of Thursdays through Saturdays, noon to 4. And then the Firehouse will be open every Saturday from 9:30 to 1. So a lot going on there. All the info is on our Facebook page and on our website, pchswi.org. That's enough out of me, though. We've built our audience. If you're watching later, because this is recorded, I hope that you're enjoying whatever's going on in your world, too. And hope that you find as much inspiration out of this as I do, which is the brief history of Plover, Wisconsin. We're lucky on our board to have two really talented historians. One is Brad Casselberry, who's also the university archivist at UWSP, where PCHS holds some of its most valuable collections. And then also his wife, Diane Casselberry, who's a reference librarian at the Portage County Public Library. So we're really happy to have both of them with us tonight. The reason that they'll be presenting on Plover is because they wrote a book together, which we have for sale in our stores. When we reopen, you can come buy them. But it's Images of America Plover by Brad and Diane Casselberry. And I'll let them tell you what's in the book as we go on tonight. But Brad and Diane, welcome and take it away.
Hi.
Thank you, John. So as he said, this is a brief history of Plover. It's not going to be too brief, I hope. But we're going to hit the high points and the low points. As many of you know, Plover has had many highs and lows, and we're just going to kind of walk you through it. So we're going to start with Native Americans in the area. Portage County and Plover are somewhat unique because there was a convergence of tribes in the area. The Menominee, the Chippewa, and the Ho-Chunk all had settlements in this region. And what you're looking at on the screen here is a trig map, which is an 1866 survey map of central Wisconsin. And as you can see the bend in the Wisconsin River there, and you can see the Plover Portage Trail. So this is a nice example of early Native American settlements, the trails they took to go up north to Big Bull Falls, to go to the east to the Tomorrow River, and also further to the Wolf River.
Okay. So in 1844, in the Wisconsin Territory, because we weren't a state yet, Portage County was located in what is now Columbia County, all the way up to the UP. And if you see the red arrow on the lower part of the screen, that's Fort Winnebago and Portage. And then the upper area is the area of Plover Portage. So in 1844, they were deciding to which one of these two places would be the county seat for the area, for the county. And so there was a vote in the spring of 1844. According to the legends, Tom McDill rounded up men from the Mosinee and the Wassa areas and brought them down to vote in this election. Malcolm Rushholt says, oh, that's a fun story, but he thinks it was more that since it was the spring, there was a lot of rivermen up from the Beloit and Rockford areas, and they voted in the election. So Plover won the election, and it became the county seat. As you can see, there's not much between Portage and Plover Portage at this time. And then in 1846, they separated out the Portage area so that it was now Columbia County, what we know it now as Columbia County. And those that work in Portage County and always get confused with the village of Portage wonder why Portage was kept for the northern part. It's reportedly because they wanted to save a few dollars. They didn't want to buy new books, so they kept the Portage name and gave Columbia to the southern half of the county.
In the mid 1800s, Plover also had a pretty bad identity crisis. Excuse me. In 1845, the post office was named Plover Portage. In 1850, it changed to Plover. In 1857, they decided to incorporate as Algernon. And in 1858, the next year, they changed it to Stanton. And then finally in 1864, they went back to Plover. And of course, it's been that way ever since.
So in the early days of Plover or Plover Portage, it was pretty typical to any early Wisconsin town in the 1840s to the 1860s. There were stages, hotels for people to stay at, like the Tremont or Empire Hotel, which is in the upper left hand of the corner. There, of course, like for the area, saloons and taverns for the rivermen, for the lumbermen, like the Jaywater Saloon in the upper right hand of the corner. And then since this is the mid 1800s, agriculture was big, and they did grow for potatoes. What we're looking at here in the bottom right hand corner of your screen is the George Washington Franklin House. He was one of the first farms in the county, and reportedly was the first to ship potatoes out of the county by rail. While we were researching for the Plover book, we noticed a lot of claims to fame with potatoes, the first wagon load, the first railroad. We're not sure how accurate it is, but it's interesting. And what's interesting about this house is it was moved in 1982 to the Portage County Historical Society's Heritage Village in Plover. It was located where Culver's currently is.
Plover has always had very strong community involvement as well. On the left side of your screen there, you will see the Plover Methodist Episcopal Church. This was built in 1858. It's currently located in PCHS's Heritage Park and is on the National Register of Historic Places. In this time period, churches were always a center of activity and meeting. So it's a very important place. There's also a lot of fraternal organizations. Plover had a Masons Lodge, which organized in 1856. Also, the Independent Order of Oddfellows, which was organized in 1854. Membership in the Grand Army of the Republic, which was Plover Post 149. And that's those gentlemen you see at the upper right hand. And an interesting factoid is that during the Civil War, Plover sent more men proportionately than any other town in Wisconsin to fight. Plover was also home to many early community leaders. Most of them were drawn because it was the county seat. So the people on your screen here are people that came very early on. On the upper left corner is Colonel James Albin. Many of you might know the name because he was the colonel of the 18th Regiment in the Wisconsin Infantry Volunteers who fought and died at Shiloh. But he was also a lawyer, a state senator, and the founder and editor of the Plover Herald. Next, we have Gilbert Park on the bottom left. He was an attorney, a DA, ended up as a Stevens Point mayor, and he shortly lived in Plover from 1861 to 1865. In the center is George Cate. He was an attorney that was drawn here specifically because the county seat. He also became a judge and a congressman, and he lived in Plover for a short time from 1848 to 52.
Interesting thing about this photo is that it was taken by Matthew Brady, who is a famous Civil War photographer that you should probably look up. He's a pretty interesting character.
In the upper right is Minor Strope. He was an 1850 settler. He also became Portage County DA and judge, and he actually lived in Plover until his death. And in the bottom right is Simon A. Sherman. He was a lumber pioneer who arrived very early in 1848, and he loved history and collected stories throughout his life.
So one thing in common about all these early gentlemen is that they only lived in Plover for a short period of time. Either they passed away or they moved up to Stevens Point. A lot of them did. At this time, Stevens Point was growing at a faster rate than Plover. So there started to be talk about moving the county seat from Plover to Stevens Point. So in 1868, there was a vote to decide where the county seat should be held. As you can see on the newspaper articles here, there was a lot of mudslinging between the towns in their respective papers. The Plover Times, up in the upper left hand of the corner, said moving the county seat would saddle us with ruinous taxation. And they also stated that that Point had come to a halt. They were not growing, to which the Wisconsin Pinery, which is the newspaper located in Stevens Point, responded that they had rebuilt more buildings than Plover contained. So at the end of the election, Point won with a majority of 340 people. Plover Times stated that it was a fraudulent election, but they still admitted that Stevens Point won. So the county seat was moved. And after that, the village of Plover dissolved into the town of Plover. And this is a plat of Plover in 1895. As you can see, in the 20 years since dissolving, the town kind of grew up along First Street, which is the modern day Post Road. And then there wasn't as much on Union Street, which is now Plover Road. That would come a little bit later, but there was a couple things like a blacksmith shop and a feed mill and a creamery later on. To the left of the red square, you will see an empty square. That was originally planned out to be kind of like the village square, the town square, where meetings would happen. And they did host meetings and events there. In the red square, you can see it says ME Church, which is the Methodist Episcopal Church. So that's the church that still stands today in Heritage Park. That entire red square is Heritage Park. We often get comments that people aren't sure where it is. Well, it's right there. So between Willow and Washington, or at the corner of Willow and Washington and Plover. So
So this time period, the late 1800s, early 1900s, we would kind of consider it Plover being on the downswing, a little hard on their luck. And Mary Bradford, who was a member of the normal school faculty, she and several colleagues went for an excursion to Plover. And I'm just going to read you something she wrote in her diary, which kind of explains the experience that she had. Our vehicle plowed through deep sand, and we were smothered with dust. The country all about was flat and sandy. Most of the farmhouses we passed were poor looking, and almost everything seemed terribly down at the heels. Then came Plover, showing all the signs of an abandoned place. Plover was an unfortunate choice for that first excursion. So unfortunately, Plover wasn't getting a very good name from visitors, but as we said before, this was a downturn, but Plover is very resilient.
And during this time, they were growing. They were establishing grocery stores. You have the Pierce and Lila grocery store, and mills. Mills were starting to become a big part of the industry of the community. The train came through the Green Bay and Western in 1872. And they also established the P line, or the Wisconsin Central train during that time. And what's interesting, in the bottom right-hand corner, bottom right-hand corner on the left, you'll see the Rosier Roller Mill, also known later as the Oberweiser Mill. So they had Springville. It was located at Springville, and they created flour there. And at the Lila store, there's a little motorcycle bike, a bike with an early motor. There's actually a bag of Springville flour in there, which I thought was kind of interesting.
As the community kept building, additional church was built. On the left, you see St. Bronislava's. In 1896, the diocese gave permission to build this church, and in 1897, it was built. It was destroyed by fire, and the new building, which is the one on your screen, was built in 1911. And then in 1991, the current one that is still there was finished. Also, more fraternal organizations were popping up in Plover. The Modern Woodmen was organized in 1888. What they did was raise money for life insurance for their members, but they also raised money to build a sanatorium for people that suffered from tuberculosis. And also the A.J. Welton Camp 83 of the Sons of Veterans, so another veteran organization. And this was under the umbrella of the Grand Army of the Republic. There was also events that were very popular at the time. Up in the upper right-hand corner is a photo of Decoration Day. This was a precursor to Memorial Day. Townsfolk would parade to the cemetery. They would have a short memorial and lay flowers on the graves of Civil War soldiers. Also, there were Plover homecomings, and the old settler picnics would take place annually.
Okay. And what's Plover without baseball? So they had baseball teams right from the beginning. Pictured here is the Wisconsin River Pulp and Paper Company baseball teams. And they would, like I said, there were several different leagues in the area for varying degrees of talent. And on the upper left-hand side is, there was a lot of gun clubs too. They had the Whiting Plover Paper Mill, the Plover Gun Club, the Wisconsin River Gun Club, and also the Whiting Plover Gun Club. We're not sure where this specific gun club was located, but there was a couple nice photos of it. And then bottom left is, as Brad mentioned, the settlers picnic. This was actually at S.A. Sherman's Grove in 1898, and it had settlers from Plover and the Point areas.
So a few other notable residents, other than the early ones who arrived when it was a county seat. is Walt Wilmot. Of course, he's in pictured in the center there. He was a professional baseball player, and he still holds the record for most walks in a game with 6. And I couldn't believe that he still held the record, and I did look it up right before, and he still has it. Clayton Slack is on the left of your screen there. This is Portage County's only Medal of Honor winner. In World War I, he cleared out an enemy machine gun nest single-handedly. And on the right side of your screen is Ruth Engford. And the Engford family, Harry, Lois, and Ruth, were part of the Engford family shows. And their house is also located at Heritage Park and is the oldest verified house in Portage County, which was built by Minor Strope in 1850.
Okay. So as Plover slowly grows, there starts to become talk about incorporating as a village again. So in 1912, they put it to a vote whether or not to incorporate. There weren't, as I was looking through newspapers for this, there was a lot of reasons against it. They said that they would be taking away half of their tax base because the town would keep the mills and the sanatorium. So that was half of the town's tax base. So the village would be left with basically no taxes, no one to tax. But they put it to a vote and they became a village. By 1922, 10 years later, there was another vote. People wanted to become part of a town again because they didn't have a tax base, just like they said in 1912. And by 1931, especially with the Great Depression, the taxes were almost more than double the rate of the township. So once again, Plover dissolved and became part of the township. So taxes were in the village were $2.42, and then the taxes in the township were $1 per $100.
So Plover kept growing, and a major driver of that was the mighty potato. The potato grew well in the sandy soil in the area. O'Cray Family Farms started operation in 1905. But in the 1950s, the real revolution came when irrigation started in the area. And this really created a boom and increased the yield of potato growing for the area.
And subdivisions were started kind of in the late 50s, early 60s. There was a huge housing boom in Plover. For example, the Plover Springs subdivision was started in 1961. There's an ad in the upper left-hand corner for that. In the center is the Hickory Meadows subdivision. We're kind of looking at it from the north towards the south. At the bottom of the screen is, let me get this right, Porter. At the top, or kind of in the center of the screen, is Hickory. And an example of one of the houses is this house on 9th Street in the lower left. It's actually would be more towards the bottom of the photo. It's kind of off the screen, but it gives you an example of oak trim, $51,000. And then, so yeah, there was a lot of new housing subdivisions through the 60s into the 70s. So everybody's living in the town, and it's growing.
Yes, it began growing quickly. The farming helps push manufacturing, and Del Monte moves in 1966. Foremost Farms is created. Bakewright Bakery moves in, and Orita moves in 1979. Growth continues in other industries as well. Recreation and retail into the 1980s and 90s. I'm sure many of you recognize these photos and places. Of course, Manufacturers Direct Mall came into Plover in 1984. Rainbow Falls was added in 1988. Golden Sand Speedway. There was parades, and Lake Packawa became a very popular recreation place.
I wish I could have been in the wave pool last week. It was hot. Okay. So with all this growth, again, there's talk of incorporation. So in 1965, there was a vote. It did not work out. As you can see in the upper right hand of the corner, that's a newspaper article from it. It was surprisingly 339 against incorporation and 168 for. It seemed to be at that time there was a big push against some of the local businesses to not incorporate. Places like Oakray, they owned. You can kind of see the amount of land in the plat there, how much land that they owned that would be in the village and would presumably be under higher taxes. So it's understandable. But the village kept growing. Between 65 and 71, there was a lot more families, younger families that moved into the new subdivisions, a lot more businesses. And incorporation meant more state road aid, and the village board could focus on urbanization in a way that the town board may not be able to, because they'd be kind of serving a rural and an urban area. So they did incorporate in 1971, and it was official on September 20th of that year.
So Plover today and into the future. Plover seems very strong. Of course, Post Road has just recently been updated. The retail and service industries are very strong and continually growing, it seems. Subdivisions continue to grow, and housing. And the further development of Lake Packawa and the park around there continue. And the community members are very supportive of those initiatives.
All right. Yep. All right. I think we're going back to you, John.
All right.
That is it. Thank you.
Let's do it. Well, first, great presentation. There's a lot I didn't know about Plover in there, and it's so interesting just to consider the change over time that plot of land has gone through. So if anybody has any questions, pop those in the comments. Here's your chance to talk to Brad and Diane. This, of course, being a part of our Talking Points Historical Education series, which is brought to you and sponsored by a grant from the Community Foundation of Central Wisconsin. So Brad and Diane, you wrote this book, which I'm going to flash back up on the screen here. And what inspired you to write a book about Plover?
To be honest, we'd seen like a ton of Stevens Point stuff, and we thought Plover deserved its time in the spotlight. It's an interesting story. I mean, how many communities have been incorporated, dissolved, and dissolved, and have gone through that many regrowths? I don't. It seems like Post Road has been torn down and rebuilt so many times, and they just keep kicking. So, yeah.
So I think the biggest thing that you kind of alluded to, and throughout the presentation, is the change that Plover has gone through. Like it went from a place of prominence to a place of being kind of a suburb of Stevens Point, in some ways. Although I don't want to say that too loud, but
no.
but in some ways, like Stevens Point has, why do you think that Plover has changed so much over the years? As opposed to, you could say Stevens Point has changed a lot too, but Post Road looks nothing like it used to.
Nothing.
Why do you think that is?
I don't know if they like to reinvent themselves or
What?
I don't.
Malcolm Rochel in his book about Plover, talking about all the name changes, he said they certainly were a lively bunch of citizens. So
they are very civically active. So
yeah,
I'm not surprised that they, they grow things up. They realize they want to change, so they do it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right on. And then what through your research on the book, what was your favorite? I don't know. Did you have a favorite moment of research or story or something where you point to that when you're like, hey, go check out this picture, this story in the book?
Well, Diane's. Oh, we didn't show the picture, but there's 4 old guys sitting outside of a store. That's Diane's favorite.
If only I could remember at the moment their names. I don't. Even if I did remember them, I don't think I could repeat one of their nicknames.
Oh, really?
They were flavorful. So it's
pup.
these gentlemen here.
Here, put it closer up.
Here.
So there you can see on the sidewalk that they have like their tobacco spit, and one of them is like, you can tell he's saying something to the cameraman that's just hilarious. I don't know.
I have a lot of character.
I love these guys.
A lot of a candid moment in a photograph.
Yes, it was.
Yeah.
A lot of these photos were taken from Walter Barnsdale, who was an early photographer and actually filmmaker from Plover.
Mm-hmm.
He had glass plate negatives. They're owned by the Portage County Historical Society, and those were just amazing to go through because a lot of them, there's a lot that are unlabeled, and you look at them and you can't find these places currently. So it's not like point where you can go, oh, hey, that's the Fox Theater or this building. So you kind of had to compare them and figure out and look at plat. So
actually, when we were writing the book or when it was just released, one of the houses in the book was being torn down at that exact moment.
Wow.
Yeah. So we were kind of capturing history before it was taken.
We parked at Heritage Park and we walked over to go see the house to double check and make sure this is it. And we're like,
it's gone.
It was there like a month ago. And
Yeah.
then we talked to Anton Ande and he's like, yep, they just tore that down.
Oh, man.
Yeah.
Wow. I mean, that makes like doing work like this more rewarding in some ways and more important because now at least it lives on in somewhere that people can find it. So,
right.
Well, thanks for writing the book. I'm going to flash up the picture of the book real quick right on the screen again. So if anybody is interested in it, it's really fun to look through and see how things have changed so much. And as we reopen coming up on Memorial Day weekend, May 28th at Heritage Park, you will be able to purchase that book. So the Heritage Park summer hours are Thursdays through Sundays, noon to 4. And if you have an appointment, you can we can meet you there and figure something out too. But Brad and Diane, thank you so much for the presentation tonight. It was great to get educated on the history of Plover. And next month, so this is one in a series that is sponsored by or brought to you by a grant from the Community Foundation of Central Wisconsin. And next month, we're working with Chelsea Piffner of Historic Stevens Point, her digital history project about a history of the Portage County library system and libraries in Stevens Point. So stay up to date on what's going on with that by on our Facebook, on our website, becoming a member is how you find out about these things before anybody else. So everybody have a great rest of your evening or whatever's going on with you. And Brad and Diane, thanks so much for the presentation.
Thank you.
Great.